What's up, guys? So me and John have been, we kind of went right into the episode. It was just, I don't even remember what the first question was, but we got into a deep conversation. Thank goodness the guys were already recording. So it's awesome. I mean, we probably went, I don't know, 75 minutes or something like that. Hour and a half, 90 minutes. And it was primarily just like mindset, secret knowledge stuff. It's not secret, but when you hear John explain it, you realize, okay, he tapped into it, right? And he actually believed it. But you're going to be blown away by this. So definitely enjoy the episode and let us know what you think. It was after doing the 75 hard, I told Devin, I said, now I know, some days, 3 days a week, I'll probably still work out twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
But the other, I'm like, I know I can create that block.
The time where you could actually do something
that's
like
what I'm
that.
doing, And
That's
I've
good.
been trying to team up at one of them, my visualization on the backside, because I want you to come out slow.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's good, though. I noticed a difference already, man, as far as with the kids
Mhm.
or with, if Devin was, I'm trying to think what day it was. This will be her last year at the school, and she's running the
Mhm.
kids' school, basically, but it's kind of a shit show.
Mhm.
The leadership isn't.
Yeah.
And so she'll get frustrated. And so the other night she was going, I never have any time. And I was normally what I would say, how I would talk to myself is like, you chose this. I
Mhm.
told you not to do, like that type of
Yeah.
thing. But that wouldn't do anything good, dude. It would just,
Mhm.
she would get pissed at me. But I've been catching, I'm much more conscious.
Mhm.
Even with the kids, I'm like, it's no, and if I do yell or whatever, I make sure I apologize. Like I'm like,
Mhm.
all right, I didn't need to do that.
Mhm.
So just stuff like that, man. I'm like, that's what I want to do. Be more
No, for
conscious.
me, and I talked about it with her. I feel like it definitely helps to be a lot more non-reactive to situations.
Huge.
And I know I was saying it also it helps you to be able to analyze that the majority of our physical responses to situations is just simply due to our thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'll catch myself sometimes where I have an argument with somebody and I'm either upset or sad or whatever. And I think, okay, if this situation didn't happen, I'd be in the same exact physical position, right? The only thing that has changed is my thoughts regarding it.
Everything, man.
And so if I could do that, you start to create separation from those thoughts. And then you start to give them a lot less power. And then you start to be able to analyze, should I actually be having this reaction to this situation? Or am I overreacting because I'm internalizing this thought too much and I'm realizing that, everything is temporary. Everything comes and goes.
Yeah.
So even when you're having thoughts that are coming into your mind that it's not something you're actively thinking about, when that thought comes in, if you just allow yourself to sit with it, you don't have to analyze it. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Yep, just be an observer. A lot like a movie screen.
Yeah.
And then you just sit with that thought, and then it's gonna pass.
Passes.
But too often, especially before I had gotten into meditation, it's you have something that comes in, and then you know that controls your mindset. It controls your physical state. You'd either be sad or depressed or anxious, or you feel like you're not motivated to go do different things, all because you're reacting to this thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I like to think about is the opposite. I'm like, okay, what if this person had said something really good to me, and then I started feeling amazing afterwards? It's like, how much power am I giving this person to control my physical state through my reaction to these thoughts that I'm having?
Huge.
And then when you start to say, okay, well, if what they said to me was really good, and then I would feel really good, but I'd be in the same exact physical position, and now what they said was bad, and I feel really bad, it's like, I shouldn't give power to either one.
No.
I should be able to just be
Yeah.
and observe, and then you're in a state where I feel like you can experience things for what they are,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Definitely.
looking at everything. Everything has a meaning. Everything has, and instead you can just acknowledge that certain things you can just be. And I feel like it allows you to be much more calm. It allows you to make better decisions. And, like Vince talked about, the the quality of your life is the quality of your decisions.
It is.
And if you become better at making good decisions, then the quality of your life is going to improve.
Yeah.
And I feel like meditation has been
it's
huge in getting that control over your mind, where you can start to, have a much better awareness around the thoughts and the thought patterns that you're having, and then you're not allowing that to dictate your life.
Huge.
So,
It is, man.
Yeah.
That's basically what mind mapping is, dude. It's that being the meta thinking about your thoughts and not responding versus reacting. Might as well jump into it then, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, so we'll do the intro at the end. We'll do the intro. So with that, okay, the meditation and the mindfulness. How long have you been wanting to do that? And like, when did you realize that was something that you needed to focus on?
So for me, it all really started about a year and a half ago when my life kind of hit rock bottom. I had gotten divorced.
When did you get? Was it a year and a half ago you got divorced, or?
So the separation started in April. So this April would be 2 years.
Okay.
But we got divorced pretty quickly. By August, it was finalized.
Okay.
So really, April of last year was kind of when things started crashing down.
April of last year.
April of 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this April will be 2 years. So pretty close to 2 years ago now, honestly.
And it just kind of seemed like it. You expect, like, obviously not expecting it, but was it like on your radar, or was it kind of like?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, we had been arguing, fighting for years, had discussed it, but just some circumstances that kind of accelerated to that point. And then at the same time, I was in a spot where the business was not in a really good spot, and hadn't really acknowledged it. And as a result, I had to step away from the business for like 2 weeks initially when the separation happened, came back up to New Jersey. And so the people that I had in place that I had to kind of run the gym, it was a complete shit show. And so I realized, okay, my staff was not that good, but primarily because I wasn't really a good leader. I wasn't making the right decisions to hire the right people, or when I get good people, I wasn't giving them good coaching and leadership to develop into the people that they should be. And so I was really in a bad spot. And then so emotionally, I had realized pretty quickly after that I had never really been alone. And so after the separation, divorce, I went from having my 2 kids, my ex-wife there, and kind of just had my normal family life and everything. But the thing is, when we moved down to Texas, we never really made a lot of friends or anything down there. So once they were gone, I was basically truly alone. So I'm in this big house by myself, and I realized at the time that I had a significant risk tolerance when it came to business. I believed in myself a lot. I knew that I was capable of these hard things, and especially anything challenging in my life, whether it was fitness, whether it was getting through undergraduate, graduate school, all these things that I have pursued in life, I always had a significant amount of discipline in my life. So I had a very high resilience, mentally, personally, physically, but emotionally it was next to zero. And so when everything happened, I became super depressed, and it was extremely challenging for me. I mean, I think I talked to one of my good friends. He's dealt with a lot of depression and stuff in the past too. And I feel like the hardest part when you're depressed is just energy. Like, you feel like you could sleep for 2 weeks straight and you still would have zero energy. And so for me, I was just exhausted all the time, and I'm just going through day to day. And the only thing that I had to hold on to was, at the time, I was trying to figure everything out with personal life, business. Was I going to try to sell the business? Was I going to move back to New Jersey? And I was trying to figure it all out. And selling the business was not an option. It was worth nothing. And I realized, I was like, okay, I'm going to save the business. That's what I'm going to do, because I had put everything into that. That was my passion. That was my goal since I was, a teenager. I always wanted to own my own business. And I got into this business because this was my passion, fitness and helping people and all of that. So I dove in and I did everything I could to grow the business. But I would basically, when I was at the gym, I'd be with my team, with my clients, got better at leading my team. But it was interesting because there was a huge dichotomy, because I'd go home and I was like, I'd sit on the couch and I would do nothing. Like I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't have the energy to do anything. So I was able to like turn it on enough to drive things forward in the business, but I couldn't make any progress personally.
Yeah.
And so I started seeing a therapist shortly after, and shortly after the separation and everything. And that was very helpful. That started to get me to work on some of these issues that I wasn't really aware of internally. Not being able to be alone, like that was terrifying for me. I never realized that I hadn't actually really been alone before. And that idea of not having anybody to share life with or whatever was absolutely terrifying for me. And I didn't know how to address it. And I also at the time, I didn't know how to be happy and content on my own. It was interesting because my self-confidence has always been high, but it wasn't until that point that I realized my self-worth was very low, like next to zero. So I was a very confident guy. I can go into a room, I could talk to people, I could lead my team, I could lead my clients, but internally I didn't feel like I was worth a whole lot. And I knew I had to work on that. And so that started the process in therapy. But honestly, a friend of mine, she had just started going to the meditation classes. She's like, oh, you should come with me, come check it out. So I did. And it was kind of the combination of that with the therapy and just kind of doing my own thing and starting to work through the pain and the things that were uncomfortable for me. And I think so often, so many people, when you have a situation that is uncomfortable, you get out of a bad relationship, or, you get fired from your job or something. Too many people, they look for external things. They look, they start drinking, they start drugs, they start going out and sleeping with everybody. And, and they're trying to find something to cover up the void that they have inside. But they don't want to sit down and sit in that dark place when you have nothing and say, why do I have nothing? Why do I feel like nothing? And sit there for a long time. And that's what it was for me. It was not days, it was not weeks, it was months, almost a year.
When you were at home by yourself?
Yeah, just super depressed. But it was actually like that time, I wouldn't give up that time for anything, because that time transformed me. Like that, going to the basement and sitting in it, and just feeling that, and then realizing, like, starting to put together that I have value outside of that. I have intrinsic value, internal value, that I'm still a good father, I'm a good person, I'm good at helping people, I can inspire people, and all of those things are not tied to anything external. Those are things that are intrinsic within me. And as I started to learn these things, that's when I started to kind of build this resilience that I didn't have on the emotional and kind of personal side. And once that started, it started this process that I created a monster, where it's like, in the best way, where I feel like I don't fear anything now. Right. Like literally nothing. I could lose everything. I could lose my business. I could lose my family, my kids, which is my whole world. And I would still be able to find a way to move on and live a life that helps a lot of people, inspires people, and changes people's lives, because I I've been to the bottom and I've stayed there. And so now I built myself out of it the right way, taking time and understanding, like, why do I feel the way that I do? And what are the issues that I need to work through? And having done that and taken the time to do that the right way, now it's like nothing can touch me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that too many people are too quick to get out of that basement, to get out of that low place, and they're like, I don't like this. This feels uncomfortable. I need to get out now, which is okay to want to get out of it, but at the same time, sometimes you got to stay down there a little longer and figure out why you're down there, and not just look for, the first thing to pull you up, because that thing that pulls you up instantaneously is probably something temporary.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you're never going to get out of it long term.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's been a journey for sure over the last 2 years, but I feel like it is something that it's been the best thing that's happened to me.
Yeah, as I say, it's a gift.
For sure, it was a gift.
You got that gift that I think people will get. Maybe it won't be as obvious as a situation, but like to your point, they don't really want to go down that road. They miss all these gifts that are given to them. That 2 years, a long time, but in the scope of things, is not that long of a time to make a transformation.
100%. Yeah.
That's like most people can't do that in a lifetime. Become that self-aware and want to sit in it, and that's really like a very stoic, principles. The internal is really what you can control, and realizing that you're invaluable, no matter what the circumstances and the external. But I think it's cool too because, knowing you for roughly that time, now I didn't know you when you were going through that. But as you went to the basement in your mind and you transformed yourself, your business transformed.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I mean, exponential. And, yeah, I mean, the amount we've grown over the last 2 years is insane.
It's amazing,
It's insane. I mean, and I know we talk a lot about in CEO and in Mastermind, John Maxwell, Law of the Lid.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I feel like there's no greater example than what I've gone through personally, that as I elevated my personal capabilities, my personal leadership, my business grew exponentially because, and it was honestly, it goes back so much to me being the solution and me being the problem, taking 100% ownership, anytime anything happens in my business now, I'm like, it's always on me. And I mean, there's even a circumstance recently where one of my trainers, he had, a flat tire, wasn't able to make it in, and just kind of canceled last minute. We had a bunch of sessions lined up that he was supposed to do. And then again, the next morning, they hadn't gotten it resolved yet. So like early in the morning, ended up texting my head trainer and saying like, oh, I won't be able to make it in. He's got a bunch of sessions. And so my initial reaction would always be like anger and be like, how can this happen? Like, how you knew this, you weren't going to make it in.
Yeah.
Like, why are you waiting? Right. But then like, I realized, I'm like, okay, this is my fault though, because I realized that just because I think that way doesn't mean that they think that way. And I realized like, okay, if he was thinking the same way that I am, he probably would already own his own business, right? But he doesn't. And he may also have never had anybody teach him the way that he should resolve a situation.
Yeah.
So I realized, I was like, okay, we had a trainer meeting that day. We meet every Tuesdays. And I'm like, this is a perfect teaching opportunity to teach my staff, what should we do in this situation? And I told them, I said, look, shit happens. You're going to get a flat tire. You're going to get sick. You may have had an appointment that you totally forgot about, and now you realize a couple hours before you're supposed to work. And I was like, I can't control that. You can't control that. And I don't expect that to happen. I don't expect these unforeseen circumstances for you to somehow be able to resolve that. But if something like that does happen, you need to come with solutions. So you need to go up the chain of command. So you need to, okay, I realize, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to make it in tonight. There's 3 hours of sessions that I'm supposed to do. Okay, well, we've got, 4 people on staff that are not training tonight. Reach out to them, see if you can get your sessions covered. If you can't get them covered, let's say you get 2 of the 3 covered. Okay, now you get them all covered. You've solved the situation yourself. I don't even have to hear about it. Let's say you get 2 of the 3 covered. Now you reach out to the head trainer and say, hey, look, I'm not going to be able to make it in tonight. I've got a flat tire. I've got 2 of the 3 sessions covered. I've already reached out to the other trainers, but I'm not sure how to resolve the next one. Now you're coming to her with solutions. She's going to be super appreciative of that. Now she's going to try to figure out how to solve the situation. She can't figure out how to solve it. Now she escalates it to me, and then she brings it to me, and now you have person A's bringing solutions, trying to resolve it, doesn't get fully resolved. Person B, they try to find the solution, they can't fully resolve it. Now they go up the chain to me. Now when you bring it to me, I'm like, okay, this is what you've done. You were responsible. You had a situation that you couldn't handle, that you couldn't foresee, and then you tried to resolve it, and then you escalate it up the chain in the right manner. And by the time it gets to me, like, I'm not going to be mad because they did everything that they possibly could, had unforeseen circumstance, and then I'll figure out, now it's my job to go in and how do I resolve the situation. But you can't walk into the situation and say, oh, I can't make it. That's it. But, I think for me, for you, we're going to look at that with our brain as a business owner, and we're going to say, like, this is ridiculous. Like, what is this guy thinking? Like, how can you possibly be this irresponsible? And we're going to go down that path. But instead, I realize I'm like, wait, how can I expect them to think this way if nobody's ever taught them to think that way? Mm-hmm. And like I told them too, I had the meeting, I told them, I brought it up, and I said, I understand that, things happen, but this is the process moving forward. Now I can have an expectation to hold them to that standard because they know about it. But they didn't know about it before. Yeah. So, I realized that. And a lot of that happens with me taking personal responsibility that, like, as a business owner, everything is my problem. Like, whatever happens in the gym, it's either I didn't give people the right training, I didn't hire the right person, I didn't give them, the motivation, the inspiration to do a good job. Like, I'm not meeting them where they're at when it comes to my staff. And I think there's no way that, 2 years ago, I would have been that person. 2 years ago, I would have been like, you're fired. Like, I'm not going to take the opportunity to realize that it's my job to elevate people. It's my job to educate people, to get them to the next level. Because I think whether it's leading the staff or leading the clients, I think we have an inherent responsibility to get people to that next highest, best version of themselves. And how can we possibly do that if anytime somebody makes a mistake in our own mind, we're just dismissing them that this person's not capable of it. They may never have had the training. Yeah. And so if we are the first person to actually give them that training, and we can do it in a responsible way where we're not yelling at them and belittling them, they're going to accept that. They're going to feel, typically, they're going to feel great. Like, they're going to feel like, okay, this guy, he didn't just push me out the door. He didn't just yell at me and be like, how could you possibly think that? And all of these things. And be like, this is somebody who I can respect because they're coming at me and they're wanting to teach me and make me a better person. And I think that most people will respect that. Most people will respond really well to that. And at the end of the day, there's some people that won't, but we can only control what we can control. And as long as we're taking personal responsibility that anytime something goes wrong, that we're going to do whatever it is in our power to remedy the things that we can, then I think that's when your business can really start to grow, because at the end of the day, you can't grow a business if you're doing everything.
No.
And that's the mistake I've made so much in the past. It's like, I try to give somebody a task. They don't do a good job. It's like, okay, I'll take it back. I'll do it. Right. And I think we've all done it.
Yeah.
And that's still my first reaction. But now I have to temper that and realize, okay, if I actually want to be a leader, and being a leader is growing people into the position where they can do a good job without you holding their hand every step of the way. And in order for me to do that, I need to make sure that I'm doing a good job in educating and leading my staff. And when they make mistakes, I'm not first looking at it from the lens of what would I do. I'm looking at it from the lens of, is there any chance that maybe they never actually learned this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe their brain doesn't work the same way that mine does. And I think that's been a big switch for me. And I feel like that's helped me to have a better quality business because I'm much more understanding and empathetic with my staff, which allows them to respect me more, respect my opinions, respect my criticisms, if you will, of them, because they know that it's coming from a good place that is trying to make them better. And I feel like I'm better at approaching those situations and having those difficult conversations. And I think, again, all of that goes back to a first willingness to have those difficult conversations with myself, which I wasn't, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Where now something happens, personally, I'm like, okay, what did I do wrong? Like, how can I make this situation better? If I'm always thinking that way first, I think it makes me much more understanding of other people and their situations too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing because it seems obvious when you say it, right? But
Yeah.
but it's the harder road, though. That's
Mm-hmm.
where people revert back, like you were saying. They go back to that comfort. I'll just take it back over.
For sure.
Well, this person's stupid because they didn't know that. But it's a great point, that we don't all think the same,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you got to think that's the operating program.
For sure.
So,
I think especially as business owners too.
Yeah.
I think we're a different breed,
mm-hmm.
but I think our mind is hardwired to think that everybody thinks the way we do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we are the complete opposite.
Yeah.
We're the 1% who are out on the fringe thinking about things from a totally different perspective. But I think the blind spot that most of us have is that we're thinking everybody else thinks the same way as us.
It
they
is.
Don't.
It's big. Yeah.
They don't at all.
Yeah, that's a big flaw. That's a great insight by you because it's a big flaw, but if you address it, right, as you've done,
Mm-hmm.
everything changes.
For sure.
And it shows you like what we were talking about at the beginning. Our thoughts really create the reality that we live.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the inner dialogue you were talking about. Like to me, the more time goes by, I'm like everything comes down to that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in your
Mm-hmm.
life, and it's a great book, Conversations with God, that Dax, who told me Mind Map, it's his
Okay.
favorite book. So I go, I've read it a few times now. But he talks about the process of creation when he's having this conversation with God, and it's your thoughts, your words, and your action.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts, and that's how you create anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you're made in the image and the likeness of the Creator. That's what it means. You can create. You have this power, and it's so obvious, right? As simple as it's your thoughts, but then you got to try to master that and really,
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't think most people are even thinking that.
For sure.
Right.
I mean, how often do people think about their thoughts?
I don't think often at all, man.
Almost never for the
Yeah.
average person, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's whether it's meditation or mind mapping or just taking any type of time period to have some level of awareness around what are you thinking and what are the thought patterns that you have. Just doing that, if you were to if every person took 10 minutes a day and they blocked it off on their calendar, and for those 10 minutes, all they did was think about what are they thinking. Like, it would literally change their life, because so often people have no idea that they're constantly spiraling with the same negative thoughts. Same negative, they're unhappy in their job.
Yeah.
They're unhappy in their marriage. They're unhappy with this. Like, nothing good ever happens to me. Like, oh, again, another day of stress at work. And you're thinking about, man, like, what if you took a second, you took a step back, and you were to look at it like that, like a movie reel, and you looked at your thoughts on a daily basis and you're like, what does that movie look like? And the movie's just a train wreck.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
Yeah.
it's just negative all day long.
All day.
And then you're like, man, okay, that's not good. Maybe I need to start thinking more positive. And then you start putting one positive thought in there. And one leads to two, two leads to three, and then away you go. And now all of a sudden, all these things that were such a negative in your life, they start changing. Your perspective on them first starts changing. Like if your job is the main thing that you realize, okay, these negative thought patterns, it's always about my job. But then you change your perspective, like, man, I'm just grateful to have a job. Like, and you think about, man, 5 years ago I was making, 25 grand a year. Now I'm making 70 grand a year. Like, yeah, I mean, I've come a long way. And then you're like, man, I'm pretty blessed, And then you're like, well, I don't like that I do this in my job, but it's like, have I ever told my boss that I don't like doing that? And you start to take some of that personal responsibility too. And then you're like, maybe now you go to your boss and you tell them, hey, I really don't like doing this. And they're like, oh, you know what? You don't even have to do that. That's Tim's job. I didn't even realize that you were doing that on a daily basis. And then now they take that off your plate. Now your job's a lot more enjoyable. Or maybe you have that conversation. They're like, you know what? I think that you're better suited for this other role. And now you go down that path, and now you have an opportunity to have a promotion or something like that. But if you're just stuck in this cycle of, negativity all the time, and you're never actually taking time first to realize that you're in a negative cycle, and then second to actually think about what are some potential solutions, and in doing those solutions first, analyzing yourself and saying, what am I doing wrong in this situation? What is my responsibility? Is there anything I could be doing better? Or is it 100% every single person that I interact with on a daily basis is doing stuff wrong and I'm doing everything right, but my life is still shit?
Yeah.
What are the chances of that? Probably zero. I can guarantee they're actually zero because I know for a fact that if your life is shit and you're doing every single thing right, when you actually step back and analyze and you start thinking about your thought patterns and the actions and everything that you're doing, and if you could objectively say, I'm doing everything right, and it's everyone else that's doing everything wrong, then you're lying to yourself because that's not possible. If you're doing the right things, if you're thinking the right things, if you're taking the right actions, if your life is not good now, it will continue to improve. It's just the laws of nature.
Thoughts create reality, right?
Exactly.
That's what it is.
So, but I think that's that's such a simple activity that if people started doing that, their life would change.
Yeah.
Take 10 minutes and think about what you're thinking every day.
It's huge. And like stuff like that, dude, and that's the power of the mind. I believe a lot of that stuff has purposely been not hidden from us because it's ours to discover, but it's not taught in schools and it's not for, and I think it's just to really keep most people just unaware, easier to control. It's if people realize that how much power they actually had, we wouldn't need people in charge of us. There's no need.
For sure.
It doesn't make, but so stuff like that, I'm like, man, why isn't that taught? Why isn't reframing taught in schools? It's so easy. But these people don't know. A lot of these teachers don't know, right? They're just teaching what they were taught or weren't taught.
For sure.
Same thing you were saying with the employee. Like,
exactly.
They weren't taught this before.
Yeah, they weren't. And I would say if you go to the average teacher at any school and you start talking about mindset stuff and reframing, different situations and all of these ideas we've been talking about, most of them they'd have no idea what you're talking about.
No clue, man.
And so it's like, how can we expect them to teach to our kids if they've never done it themselves, they've never experienced it themselves? So
it's cool when you see it. It comes out of places. I'll have experiences where you don't expect to see an example of it, but it shows up and it gets you excited because there are other people that you wouldn't think. Like, for example, when I got this hat, I went over here. It's in town.
Yeah.
The printer. One of the employees there. He's probably, let's say, 50 years old.
Okay.
Never saw him before. He's like, he starts joking with me right away. He said, you got a knife to cut the box? He goes, you look like a guy who would have a knife. That was the one day I didn't have my knife on me, like I normally do,
of
man.
course, of course.
So he cuts it open and he's like, man, that color, he goes, the color combo is awesome. He goes, what is it? And I'm telling him about the panda. He goes, oh man, he goes, I was like 320 pounds, now he's 180. I go, what happened? He goes, I was in the ICU, I was alcoholic, all this stuff. He goes, never again. I turned it around. He looks at me. He goes, it's all in your fucking head right here. I go, exactly. I said, you get it, man.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
It's true.
This guy was transformed, and he's working at a little shop. He's not. He just transformed his, his identity shifted. He's like, never again. He goes. I always tell people, like with diet and stuff. If I knew now about the brain that I did when I was competing with the bodybuilding shows, it would have been so much easier.
Oh, for sure.
Because before it was like an external thing. If you realize it's like a spiritual quest and it's all in your head, it's just it's so much more learnable and enjoyable.
No, I agree completely. I feel like you can't become the person that you want to be until you can actually envision and believe it in your own mind first.
Yeah.
And most people, they're never taking the time to do that. They never actually, they think about at a very surface level, I want to be richer. I want to look better, but they don't actually take time to envision.
Yeah, feel it.
Who is that person that I want to be? And then if I were to actually become that person, if I were to lose 100 pounds, if I were to make 10 times as much money, how would that person operate in daily life? What would they look like? What are the conversations that they have? Who are the friends that they have? Who do they surround themselves with? What are the books that they read? What are the things that they watch? What are the things that they listen to? And if you start looking at that level, you realize that your habits, the people you surround yourself with, the things that you listen to, that is what dictates who you become.
Yeah.
And you have control over all of that. And so if you realize that and you're like, okay, well, I want to become this person that's 100 pounds lighter. And right now, every person that I hang out with is 100 pounds overweight. Every Friday, we go and we eat McDonald's, and then we'll go out for drinks, and then we'll do this. And then the people that I surround myself with, do we ever talk about exercise? Do we ever talk about money? Do we ever talk about, progress? Do we ever talk about becoming that highest version of ourselves, right? Do I ever have these conversations? But if I was the guy who, was 180 pounds and ripped and made $1 million a year, do I think that do I think I'd be hanging out with the same people? Do I think I'd be doing the same things? Do I think I'd be having those same conversations? It would be so obvious that you wouldn't be. You'd very quickly recognize that none of that would be the same, because it wouldn't be possible to be that person and to have the same surroundings, the same influences, and do the same things. Your life would have to be completely different. So when you realize that, if you start doing those things, you're going to become that person. It's cause and effect.
Yeah.
But people don't look at it that way, because they never take time to analyze. They just think, oh man, I really wish I was lighter. I wish that I made more money. I wish I was happier. I wish I had a better relationship. And it's like, well, what are you doing to change any of that stuff? You're not changing any of the things that would actually force that to happen, because it becomes inevitable. If you change your surroundings, you change the things that you listen to, you change your actions on a daily basis, you start doing hard things, you start waking up earlier, you make time for exercise, you make time to eat better, you do all those things, of course you're going to become that person. But if you just think, oh yeah, I want to be that person, but you never take it to the next level of what does that person do, act, think, say, etc., you're never actually going to get there. But the path to get there is actually a lot easier than you think. And that's one of the things that I realized. I'm like, I've always been hyper ambitious. I've always been very successful in a lot of the things I did. But I started realizing, okay, I need to take that to the next level. I need to get even more uncomfortable. I need to put myself around people and in rooms that I don't belong in right now, because I'm going to belong there in the future because I need to become that person, you know? Like if you start surrounding yourself with millionaires and you find a way to get into that circle, then you're bound to become that person. But the thing that people have to realize first is you need to provide value to those people for them to want to be around you.
Sure.
And so you need to, if you're somebody who's not doing anything in your life that's significant, that nobody wants to talk to you about, like if what you can offer a multimillionaire is, oh, did you see the game on Friday? They don't want to talk about that, you know, like that.
Yeah.
What value do you bring to their life? So I think a lot of it, again, it goes back to that personal responsibility. It goes to, can you become somebody who's interesting and provides value to people? And I mean, you think about yourself, like so many people want to talk to you because you're an interesting guy. Yeah. Like you've done a lot of cool stuff and you've experienced a lot of cool things and you've written books and you can talk about a lot of things. So people are like, oh yeah, I want to go talk to Kyle. Like he's a cool guy. Like I want to learn more about him. Right. And for me, it's the same thing. Once I started focusing on not just being a guy who just works out and a guy who just happens to own a gym, but it's like, okay, what are the other things that I do? What are the other things that make me unique? What are the skill sets that I have that are valuable? And then all of a sudden, like all of these people that are much higher than me, you know, like that, especially from a financial perspective, they start falling into my life and they're really interested in what I have to say, you know, and they're really interested in learning from me and I could provide a lot of value to their life. I'm like, man, this is crazy. But then what happens then is I'm presented with all these opportunities that I never dreamed of. And it's because you first become, like I always say, if you want to influence people, you have to first become an influential person. Like you can't influence someone if you're not an influential person. So it's like, well, how do you become an influential person? It's like you need to become somebody that is worth listening to, somebody that's worth following, somebody that, you know, when you stand up in a room and you say something, people like, they quiet down. They're like, oh, what's he got to say? You know, like, but you need to become that person first before you have a level of influence over people. Yeah. And so a lot of it's crazy because it's all personal development. Yeah. It's all personal development. It's if you're somebody who's training hard and you're fit, like that is the easiest way to start to get yourself, like people say, how do I get into circles with people who are millionaires and billionaires and all these other things? The easiest way, just become super fit. Yeah. Because everybody respects somebody that's super fit. Because it doesn't it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can't buy a great physique. Yeah. Like you could have liposuction, you could do all this stuff, but if you're not training, you're going to gain the weight back. You're not going to look good, you know? Yeah. But if you're somebody who is training hard, you have an amazing physique, you have instant credibility and instant respect from almost anybody. So that's the first thing. Like if you literally just do that, you're going to start to get yourself in some good circles. Yeah. And then from there, now you become an interesting person. You become well-read. You know, you research, you know, different areas, whether it's business or finance or whatever. Let's say you're really interested in real estate. Just start reading real estate books. Start listening to real estate podcasts, right? Now let's say if you're a super ripped guy, you don't own any real estate, but you know a shit ton about it. And you go to a mastermind group or an event, a real estate event. You're there, but you're the fittest guy in the room. Like people are going to come talk to you. And now let's say that you don't have any real estate deals, but you know a lot. So they come talk to you because you're super fit. And they're like, this guy's ripped. Let me go talk to him, right? They start talking to you. Now, once they start talking to you, they realize you're not an idiot. You know this stuff. You know these real estate stuff. And they're like, all right, I've got this deal coming up. You want to be involved in this? It's like, now all of a sudden you're involved. You're doing real estate deals with guys who have 20 times more experience than you because you made yourself somebody of value first, where maybe there was something that even though this guy's done a lot of real estate stuff, maybe there was something in your research and all the books that you read and podcasts that you listened to that you were able to educate him and you were able to provide some value to him that he didn't know. So he's like, okay, this guy, he's got something. He's like, maybe I want to work with him. And I already know he's disciplined. He's in great shape.
Yeah, that's
He's got the habits and routines to have discipline. So I have an understanding that if I do business with him, he's probably somebody that I can count on and I can rely on because he counts and relies on himself.
Yeah.
And so I think so many people, they're like, what is the path? How can I possibly like get better in life? It's like, well, first you make yourself better. You start doing that. And then you're going to present yourself with these opportunities to be around people that are really doing things. And then you could very, very quickly start to elevate your life. And you look back 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you're living a completely different life that you couldn't even imagine, just a few years before. It's powerful stuff.
It is, man. It really is. This is next level. It's. I said it to what was it? A couple masterminds ago. The last one in November. You were up for the award against Devin, right? For the CEO groups, the biggest turnarounds or biggest improvements, which was amazing. We could go over that. But then, and I've seen it in the CEO, like you were a master manifester. I think that's how I phrased it. But because you talk about it where you see it, like when you say, okay, I want to hit this number by the end of the month, and you picture, and you come within like $10 or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to see in action though, because that is how it works. But you have to believe it.
You have to believe it, and yeah, I mean that. I think it goes back to a lot of stuff that we're both interested in, whether it's manifesting, visualization. Like when I will set a number, a revenue goal for the end of the month, like that number is like burns like a fire in my brain every day. Like, and I'm just become obsessed. I become obsessed about it. And I think when you have that level of obsession about anything, the universe works in your favor to make it happen only if you are putting in the work along the way.
Yeah.
And so I think it's two pieces. And some people, they're like, I want a Lamborghini. I think about it every single day, but they're not doing any of the work to actually get themselves there, right? And so that it's not going to happen. You need A plus B. You need both. You need to have the obsessive mindset. You create the goal, and then you have to drive towards it with the same level of obsession. But when you do, it's insane how the universe conspires in your favor. I mean, I've had so many circumstances where, and I'll say it, I've said it many times before, I believe that if you take off the last 2 days of the month, I would probably make at least 30% less overall revenue.
Wow.
Because month after month after month, I'll be coming in that last couple days and I'm behind, but I'm like, I don't get discouraged. I'm just like, I got to find a way. I got to find a way. And so I could just keep pushing. And so, for me, when I was handling 100% of the sales and all of that, then I'm just calling nonstop. But even though I might make 100 calls that day, none of those people may potentially turn into new clients. But because I'm putting in the action, I'm putting in the work. Like I've had days where I was down. I'm like, okay, tomorrow is the new month. So it's the last day of the month. And I'm 12,000 behind in my revenue goal, which is a lot. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how the hell this is going to happen, but I'm going to make this happen. So, and then, the night before, I get a new website lead that comes through. So I call them first thing in the morning. Can you get in today? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I get them scheduled. I'm like, all right, I'm going to sell them this $3,000 package. So I'll get them, that's 3. And then I'm like, okay. So I just keep calling. I'm trying to figure out how do I get people in. And then I had sent out an email, let's say 3 days before, and a former client actually reaches out that day and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about getting back in. I'm like, oh, perfect. You want to do the same thing you did last time? They were one-on-one. Another 3,000. All right, now I'm at 6. And I was at 0, right? And then I'm like, okay. And then I remember this one time, this day, I ran home for lunch, and I lived just a couple minutes away from the gym at the time. And my phone rings, and it was this guy, and he's like, yeah, I'm interested in personal training, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, when can you get started? He's like, well, I'm over here now. I was like, can you do 20 minutes? I'll be back in the gym. He's like, yeah, I can make that work. I raced back over to the gym, and he wanted to do, we normally sell like 36 sessions. It's like our biggest package. He wanted to do a bigger package. But I also have like 100 session, which is like down at the bottom, kind of like nobody really buys it. Although I've sold quite a few. And so he's like, so I make him a deal. I'm like, well, we do in between, and you do 48 sessions, and it ended up being like $5,000 or something like that. So now I'm like, I mean, I was nowhere close. I was $12,000 away, and now, I'm like at 11,000, and so I'm almost there. And then like last minute, I think I got somebody else new in and signed them up on something, and I hit the number. But the craziest thing is, it wasn't like that happened one time. That happened month after for the last 2+ years. I mean, over and over and over again, where that last 2-3 days, it's like everything comes together. But the thing is, I'm working all month. It's not like I just worked the last two. Like, I'm pushing with that same level of intensity every day. But it's just like, it's almost like the universe is testing you. Like, are you going to be able to sustain this level? Do you really want it this bad? And I just keep pushing, even though things are not working out. And it's like, oh man, this is not happening. I don't think I'm going to hit it this month. I don't think I'm going to hit that goal. But I'm like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep pushing. So even though the universe is testing me, is this guy going to break? I'm not going to break. So I push through. And then it's like that last day or two, the universe is like, okay, you didn't break. I'll reward you. Here come the people. And then they come in, and then I hit the numbers. And it's crazy because I wouldn't believe it if somebody just told me, but I've experienced it myself over and over and over again, that I'm like, I know this is true. Is it you create this level of obsession around what your goals are, and then you work relentlessly towards it. It's going to happen. It's just that I think most people, they're not all the way there on either one. They're 90% obsessed with their goal, or they put in 90% of the work, and then they get 50% of the result. And they're like, this doesn't work. But I think very rarely do people put 100% obsession, 100% work. Because I've almost never met somebody that I've talked to that has said there's been a time where they put in 100% of obsessive workload. They are 100% obsessed with the goal, and it didn't happen. It just doesn't happen. It's just that people think they're there, but they're not actually. If they go back and look, was I actually giving it everything I possibly could? They'd realize that they weren't. And that's why it didn't happen. But if you do, like, the universe will reward you for sure.
Yeah. How much in that equation right there, like in the monthly example, does the deadline play a part?
It's a huge part. I think whenever you're setting a goal, you have to have a deadline, because I feel like that's positive pressure. Like, there's negative pressure and positive pressure, and negative pressure would, I guess, be, and again, it kind of goes back to how you internalize things. It could be, let's say it's coming from your boss or whoever, your spouse. You have pressure around some particular deadline, or something that needs to be done. But I feel like most of the time, it actually is more so just how we interpret it, and that most pressure can be positive pressure if we interpret it in the right way. And for me, I feel like deadlines is that positive pressure. And I know for me personally, I think that's why, I know that I have a very high risk tolerance when it comes to business and things like that. And when I started off in the business, I didn't pay myself for the first 18 months, was just taking on more and more debt, maxing out every credit card I had, funded the business on personal loans. And there were so many times where I literally would have went out of business. I had paid rent with $50 in my checking account many, many times in that first year or two. And I think that was pressure, immense pressure. And I think that built this level of resilience, but it also created a normalcy around the pressure for me, where it's not like I like it. It's part of a success principle for me, if you will. Like having that pressure forces me to do more than I would if I didn't have the pressure. And I think I had the pressure almost in a life or death type situation, where had I not figured it out in that first year or two when I was paying rent with $50 in my checking account month after month after month, for me, it felt like I would lose everything, because I didn't have any money. I didn't have anything to fall back on. I mean, obviously I could have went and worked as a physical therapist, but I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, the ability to ever pay that off, working for somebody else. And then you throw on all of the debt that I'd have on top with the business and everything if that failed. For me, it was life or death. It was like I had no option. Failure was not an option. I had to figure out a way. And then I felt like because of that, I just continued that mindset even when I started to make money. So when I set a deadline or a goal, let's say on a monthly revenue, for me, I treat it the same way. I treat it almost as if I'm going to lose everything if I don't get there. Now, the truth is that I wouldn't, but I approach it with the same mindset and the same like tenacity of how I'm going to drive towards that goal, because I set that number and I hold myself personally accountable to it, that if it doesn't happen, it almost is kind of like the end of the world type thing. Like I'm going to lose it all. Like I want to put that pressure on my mind to see what I'm actually capable of. And I guess there is, it's different in that I could go a month or 2 months or 3 months and not hit the goal, and it's not like I lose everything financially. But at the same time, I'm like I kind of like I'm looking to buy another car right now because I love cars. So I'm looking to buy an older '69 Mustang, and when I buy that car in the next couple months, like I'll buy it in cash, but it'll take a lot of my personal reserves to do so. But like I'm not even slightly worried about it. Like I like it. Because I'm not planning on making any less money. I'm planning on making a shit ton more. And so I'm like, who cares if that puts me behind the eight ball? Like I love being behind the eight ball. So I love that positive pressure of having a deadline. And I mean, even I know I was talking with one of my friends who's he's looking to exit his company for quite a bit of money, life-changing money, like would never have to work again for the rest of his life. But he's obviously, the reason he got there is because he's an incredible entrepreneur, super smart guy, super driven, amazing hard worker, works around the clock, super focused. So he's built this enormous company. And we were talking about, when he exits, what is he going to do as far as like with money and stuff like that? And he wants to, with the next companies, he starts not really fund it with that much money. Like he wants the same pressure of that startup entrepreneur, figure out a way to make it work with no money, not have the luxury of I've got millions of dollars that, oh, this isn't working. Let me just fund more money into it and fund, because you need that pressure in order to actually make it work as an entrepreneur. And almost everybody I know, including him, who's really made it big, were kind of down to their last dollar. They were at that point in the business where they try it, maybe things are going, but then it's not really going well. And you're at that point where it's the make or break point. It's you either decide I'm going to walk away or I'm going to figure out a way to make this work. And I've only got a couple dollars left in my account. So I have to find a way to get that next client, to get that next business, to make this thing happen in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks before that rent check comes due. And that pressure, I feel like that's really what transforms people. It either turns you into the person that you are capable of doing this, or it forces you to crumble, and then those people never come back. And that's why so many entrepreneurs fail too.
Yeah.
I think it's just that they don't have a willingness to persevere under that immense pressure that most people who work a 9-to-5 job will never really understand what it's like.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about on a daily basis, even if you have your business running pretty well without you, the level of uncertainty that you have on a daily basis, because there is, I mean, on any given day, it's like 10 different things happen that the shit hits the fan. And I think as you become more seasoned as an entrepreneur, you become less reactive to it. And you realize, okay, I can make this work. I've been through worse. And it allows you to be able to work through those challenging circumstances and come out on top. But it all comes down to an ability to handle pressure. And I think at the highest levels, people that run the biggest companies, even if you think about a salaried CEO type person, they're not being paid tens of millions. I mean, you think about, Jamie Dimon runs Chase Bank, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, his salary is, I don't know, $60 million a year, something like that. It's tens of millions of dollars a year for sure. He's not being paid that money because of how hard he works. It's not because he works around the clock. He's being paid that money because he has significant decisions that are under the highest pressure that he needs to make the right decision. And so as you get higher up into having more and more responsibility, having more employees, having a larger company, multiple companies, all of those different things, your value is your ability to handle pressure, your ability to be calm under pressure, your ability to be clear-headed, have a clear mind, and make the right decision regardless of how much pressure is on you in that situation. Because you got to think, if you're running a multi-billion-dollar company, you might have 1 or 2 decisions per week that you make. But each of those decisions could have a financial impact of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So you make the wrong decision, it reflects big time. And then you think about it that way, and you're like, oh, $50 million a year. I mean, it's fairly reasonable for those decisions, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people don't see it from that perspective. But if you want to continue to elevate your life, whether it's in business or any area of life, your ability to handle pressure and to be calm and make good decisions under high pressure situations is going to be paramount in order to actually have success and move forward in that way.
Yeah. It's a couple of things popped to my mind when you were talking, a lot of things. Before I forget, when you said, okay, how it's a very high failure rate, right, with entrepreneurs. And I thought of when you said that, they shrink away, they never, where do they go, those people?
I think a lot of them, they just
What
go.
happens?
I feel like most of them, they just go and work a 9-to-5 or something like that. I think a lot of people fear failure more than failure itself. But I think that the ones that fear failure so much and then actually fail, I think it goes one of two ways. Either people realize it's actually not that bad. I'm going to be all right. Like I'm still breathing. Like I always say too, I'm like, I don't fear failure anymore, because if I fail at my business or I fail at whatever venture I want to do, it's like, man, I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. So if I'm still breathing, I still have an opportunity to go do it again or go do something else. And I mean, we don't know how much time we have on this earth. So why would you not take advantage and do the best that you can, give it your all? And if you fail, like if you're still breathing at the end of the day, go try again. But I think so many people that do fail, they don't look at it that way. You know, they fail and they feel like failure is permanent. They feel like if they fail, they are a failure. And I mean, you're only a failure if after you fail, you give up and you don't try again. That's it. But I mean, like, the good thing is, unlike a video game that you're playing at an arcade, you might die in the game or you fail the level or whatever, and then that's it. Like you could put more money in and you could play again. But I mean, in some ways it's pretty similar in life. You could just try again. You just play again until your time runs out. But I think so many people, they're not looking at it that way. They feel like if they go and they try something, they do something ambitious and it doesn't work out, then that is the label they have to walk around with for the rest of their life, that they're a failure, they didn't make it. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. You look at anybody that is super successful, a lot of these big time entrepreneurs that have, created some of the biggest companies of all time, almost every single one of them failed multiple times before they actually succeeded. I mean, especially when you talk about like these big billion-dollar companies, usually the founder of those companies had anywhere between 3 to 7 failures in a similar venture prior to making it on that one. But again, it goes to, why are they there now? Is their resilience, because every time they failed, they were like, next time, next time, next time. Versus I think the average person fails and they're like, this is not for me. It wasn't meant to be. I guess and it's interesting too. I don't know how it was for you, but when I was making the decision to open up my own business, I always felt internally that I was capable of it. I always felt like I was born to be an entrepreneur. I was born to own my own business. I always felt that. But then when I opened my business, and especially, you open the doors and you got nobody in there. I mean, I was probably 5 months in and I had 9 clients or something like that. And I'm just losing thousands of dollars every single month. And you have that question in the back of your mind, like, am I actually capable of this? Am I the person I thought I was? Or am I actually not? Am I an imposter? Am I not an entrepreneur? Am I not as good at this as I thought I would be? Am I not meant for this? And I had that question every single day. And I mean, I still have that question, but it's a lot quieter now than it was before because I've had some success. But at the same time, I think that's probably the reason why people, when they fail, they don't come back. Because I think it is natural for every entrepreneur to have that question. Because what we do is not normal. It is not the typical path to go out there and have zero guaranteed income and say, I've got all these thoughts in my head of what I think this business could be. I've created this business in my mind and I want it to come into fruition. I want it to come into reality. And then you go and you try to pursue it, and you're going to have that voice in the back of your head. You can't actually do this. You weren't meant for this. But then you're trying to, come at it from the other angle and say, yes, I do believe I was meant for this. And you have that battle back and forth. And so then if you fail, it's like that voice that said you weren't meant for this wins. And so I think a lot of people, and I don't know, honestly, it's hard for me to say that if I did fail initially within the first couple of years, especially when COVID hit and everything else. And when COVID hit, I was only a little over a year into my business. So I wasn't even profitable yet at that point. And for me personally, I made the decision that I said, I'll die before I fail. I'm not going to fail. And I drew a line in the sand with myself, and I said, no matter what happens, I won't fail. And I just pursued it that way. But I think about, well, what if I did the same thing, and what if I did fail? What if it didn't make it? I don't know how I would react psychologically from that point.
Yeah.
Would I, let's say I got 2-3 years in, and then, I wasn't able to pay rent, I had to close down. That voice that said, this isn't meant for you, would have won out in that scenario. And I don't know that I would have had necessarily the mental resilience to say, I didn't win this time, but that doesn't mean I can't win in the future. So, I guess I could understand for sure entrepreneurs that go out and do it and fail, and then they don't want to come back because they feel like that voice won, the one that says you weren't meant for this, instead of the one that says you were.
Yeah. And that makes me think back too to like, when you said, talking back to the fitness level, physical fitness. Like I think I'm not just talking about necessarily just working out, but when people actually can push themselves hard into uncomfortable places. You look at somebody like Joe Hashi, right? That it builds that. Like, you could just handle this extreme physical discomfort. And that's the same thing as mental discomfort.
I agree completely. And so I believe that there's certain parts of your mind that you can only access through physical challenges and physical discomfort. And I think most people never really tap into that. And I know for me, the very first time I did, I remember it. I can feel that moment. I picture that. I remember that memory as clear as day. And I was a sophomore in high school. So I started training going into high school. So I was 14 years old. I was 100 pounds, about 5 feet tall. So I was super skinny kid, had no muscle. I was good athlete, always a really good athlete, but always like the smallest kid, short, small. Started training, fell in love with it. Always looked up to my dad. He never competed or anything like that, but always loved bodybuilding, had all the books, Arnold's books and everything like that. So he was my idol. And my dad was always, very fit, like just had a beer belly, but always big arms, loved training, trained hard. So he was my inspiration. So when we actually my dad is like a handyman, in terms of like he could fix anything. So in our basement growing up, we had like a gym in our basement, but it wasn't like it was nice pieces that were bought, at a health club. He built most of the stuff. So it was really, really hardcore stuff. It was awesome. So he built like, the squat rack from metal framing and brackets and all different types of stuff. So it was super cool. So really my training started in the basement. That was the foundation of my training, was at my parents' house in the basement. And I remember I was sophomore in high school. So at the time I weighed around 130 pounds. So I gained 20 pounds a year through high school from training. So I was around 130. It was a winter, sophomore year. And I was training legs that day. So I was down in the basement, had the music going. And at the time I could squat 200 pounds for maybe 8 to 10 reps. So not a lot of weight nowadays, but I was a 130-pound kid. It was pretty good, not bad. And so I remember that day, I was doing my last set. So I was going to shoot for 10 reps. And I got to 8, felt pretty good, hit 9, got to 10, kind of eked it out. But I was like, you know what? I think I'd do another. Let me try to do 11. I had never done even more than 10. So I squat down, grind it out, 11. Like, okay, I think I could do one more. Let me do 12. Grind it out, 12. All right. And then it was like really right after that 12th rep, I was like, let me see what I can do. Like, let me see how, I just want to keep going one at a time and see where I get. So then I did 13. And as soon as I got to 13, I was like, well, I'm definitely doing 15 because I don't like 13's a weird number. 15's nice, like kind of rounded number. I was like, all right, let me get 15. So I grind out 14, grind out 15. And I know you've done, higher rep squats, especially with heavier weight and stuff like that, which was at the time, that was a relatively heavy weight for me and my frame and everything like that. So, when you do high rep squats, you're under the bar for a long time. You're not racking the bar. So now I'm like, okay, I'm starting to feel it. Starting to feel that fire coming up the back of my legs. My lower back starting to get a little tight, So I'm like, okay, 16, 17. I get to 17. Now I'm like, all right. Now I'm starting to feel like all the way up from the back of my legs, all the way up to my head. Everything starts to feel like it's on fire, and you're just holding that bar. You're under, at this point, 3-4 minutes under the bar, which is almost double my body weight at that point, So I'm just grinding through. My heart's beating out of my chest. I'm just, controlling my breath. One more. And I remember the feeling that my legs felt almost mechanical in terms of I couldn't really feel like the muscle was just like up, down, up, down. You're just doing the motion. And so I get 18. And once I got to 18, I was like, I have to get 20. Like, there's no way I'm not getting 20. So grind it out. I get 20 reps. Now I'm under the bar, a good 4 minutes or so. I'm like, I think I could do one more. All right, one more. Get 21. Once I get to 21, I was like, all right, I got to get to 23. That's Michael Jordan. I want to get Michael Jordan. I get to 23, and then I end up just, once I hit 23, I was like, I have to hit 25. I was in my mind. So I grind out 24, get 25, lean forward, rack the bar, lay on the ground, just heart beating out of my chest, sweating profusely. And I remember it was like I just unlocked this part of my mind that I never knew existed. It was like I entered a new reality because at that point, the most I'd ever done was 10 reps, 200 pounds. And I just did 25. I just did, 2.5 times as much as I had ever done with a relatively heavy weight for me at that time. And I was like, this is fucking insane. I was like, I am capable of so much more than I thought. It was like this part of my heart, my mind, my soul, everything. I just realized I can do so much more than I thought. Like, there is so much more inside me than I thought was even there. And I remember I came up the stairs. My dad was in the kitchen. He's like, how's your workout? And I told him, and I remember the look on his face, I'll never forget. It was like, he was so proud, but he's also like he couldn't believe it, like that he was inspired, and it's just like, man, like this kid is special. Like what he did, like this is, a young kid, 15 years old at the time, is doing this. And I'm like, that never left me that day. And since then, I've done that same thing, that higher rep squat where you tap into. And it's not like, I know you've done it. You can't do that every day. That's something you do once a year, maybe. Where you have to be in the right mindset in order to actually push yourself that far beyond your limits. But when you do it, it's like every time you're like, wow, we are capable of so much more. And I think that's the reason why you look at, like what Joe Hashey's doing with these marathons and ultra marathons, and it's you're chasing that feeling once you've got it. And most people will never experience that in their life because most people never push themselves physically to that level to where they actually reach that untapped potential. But I think that the physical endeavor is really unique in that it is a way where you can do that you can't do in any other form. There's no way to bring that out. You can't tell somebody about it and they hear about it and they're like, oh yeah, now I'm capable of doing more too. No, you can't hear about it. You got to do it yourself.
You got to do it.
And it's an extreme level of discomfort that once you endure it, you're like, man, like that carries over to every aspect of your life. And that's what people don't realize. It's not just the physical. It's like, I didn't do that. And then I was like, oh, now I could lift more and that's it. Like I remember that first year of business when there was nobody and I'm just trying to figure out how to do it. I would think about that day when I was 15 years old. And I use that as my strength, as like, man, I'm capable of a lot more. I can't give up now because I know that if I feel like I'm working hard, I feel like I'm doing everything I think I can, I'm probably capable of at least double. And so I need to keep pushing. And I think people don't even realize, like, you only need that to happen once. Like, I've done it a lot of times since then in different physical endeavors. Squats, for me, I feel like is the best one.
Yeah.
I think in the gym, that's probably the only one because I think your legs are so physically strong because we walk around on them all day that people don't realize that they're capable of so much more.
Yeah.
Where I think if you try it in a bench press or something like that, your arms are going to give out and you can't will them to do more. But I feel like with your legs, you can will them to do so much more, so much more. But yeah, I mean, that to me, that's one of the best memories of my life. And I feel like that it's crazy how even just from that one time, it has carried me so much further in my life because I reflect on it all the time when things get challenging.
Yeah.
I'm like, remember that. You can do a lot more. You can do a lot more. And so I mean, if people have never tapped into that physical side, pushing yourself beyond your limits, whether it's a high rep, heavy set of squats, running a marathon, an ultra marathon, a triathlon, any of these types of things, you're leaving so much on the table that you don't even realize until you actually have done that.
Yeah.
So
it really is, man.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like Goggins. Right?
Yeah, just
That's
like Goggins.
It is, man.
Yeah.
What okay, I got a couple more for you. Maybe we could talk, I'm loving this.
I know we can talk all day.
How much do you think it is we're talking about the success, right, and the mindset? So it's a matter of focus, but not just addressing your weaknesses, being aware of them, but not realizing what your true, like the zone of genius is and not doing that. Mm-hmm. Like how much of a factor do you think that is? Not actually saying, okay, these are the three things I should be doing all the time and I should just not stop doing them.
I think it's I think it's easiest to talk about that in the entrepreneur space. And I think that there is a process to it where I think in the beginning you should do everything because there's no way to discover your zone of genius until you have done every aspect of the business. For example, marketing, sales, leadership, if it's fitness, training, all of those things, you have to do them all, and you have to do them all for enough time to see what shakes out and what you realize, like, oh man, this comes naturally to me. I'm really good at this. I need to press harder on this because this is, like you talked about, your zone of genius, where I think sometimes in the entrepreneur space, people are too quick to give up things without having really done them themselves. And those things could have actually been their zone of genius, I mean, if you're, like, I know for me, sales, for example, like I'm really good at sales. I mean, I feel like I could sell anything to anybody. But I was terrible at sales when I first started, and I hated sales. I absolutely hated it. I hated the idea of it. I felt like the slimy used car salesman, and I hated asking people for money. It felt uncomfortable for me. And I think if I were to approach a situation and be like, okay, clearly I'm not good at sales. That's not my zone of genius. Let me focus on marketing. I'm better at marketing, and I'm just going to offload the sales right away. I would have never realized that I actually am really good at sales, because once I started training on it, I got an appreciation for it. And then as I got an appreciation for it, I realized, like, man, I'm good at this and I like it. Like, I really I love sales now. It's one of my favorite things to do. So even though I'm giving that up right now in my business so that I can do other things, it is definitely one of my zones of genius, and I'm giving it up right now, not necessarily to not do sales. It's so that I can do other locations, other business, and I need to grow and scale and then teach more people sales. But also, that's, even for me, I felt like that was the next level. And that's what I've been telling myself recently is, okay, I got really good at sales. I realized that is one of my zones of genius. How do if I actually am really good at it, I should be able to teach someone to do it as good as me. That's mastery of it, right? If you're just good at something, you can be an expert in it. But if you truly have mastered an area, then you could teach other people to be just as good in it. And so for me, I think, like, I'm not necessarily giving up sales right now. I am taking that zone of genius to the next level by teaching someone else to be just as good as I am at sales. So I think that there's a lot of perspectives on that, but I think that in order to figure out what you're best at, what your zone of genius is, you need to do everything first. And if you're not an entrepreneur and you're somebody, that is just working for somebody, and I think that's honestly, I think that was the original purpose of college and of, like, going in, you try a bunch of different things, you figure out what you're good at, where it's so far from that now, because now people are going in and I feel like they're not actually trying different things. They're not experiencing different areas and allowing themselves to truly discover what they're good at, what their passions are. But I mean, is a whole other topic, but I mean, I'm not a huge advocate of college and higher education in general.
Yeah.
And so for me, if you're not an entrepreneur, I think as a young kid coming out of high school, like, the first thing you should do is say, I'm going to take 2-3 years and I'm going to go do a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to go try a bunch of different career paths that don't require college and see what I'm good at. And especially nowadays with YouTube and everything, I mean, you could learn anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's so many things that you could learn online for free in all different areas. Try out, see what you're good at, see what you're passionate about, find out what your true, zone of genius is in terms of things that come easy for you, that you enjoy doing, and you get great results from it. And then you can start to pursue that. And I think that's a better path for people. So I think, the basis of that question is, like, should you make your strength stronger or focus on making your weaknesses stronger so you're good in all areas?
Yeah.
And I think that I think the answer would be both in a sequential order. That the first thing you should do is do everything. So if you're weak in any area, you do want to make that stronger so that you can figure out that sometimes it could actually be a secret strength,
Sure.
that you didn't even realize because you didn't pursue it for long enough.
Yeah.
You just dismissed it right away. But then once you've done that, then you can actually more clearly define, okay, what are the things that I'm super good at and passionate about, and I have great success in those, and now I'm going to continue to do those things, and then I can delegate the other things that don't get me super fired up, and that's where you're going to make progress a lot faster.
Yeah.
So I think focusing on your zone of genius is the way to go, but you need to take some time to figure out what those zones are first before you go all in on just one or two areas.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant, man. So we definitely gonna have to do part 2. I got a call at 3.
You're good.
Otherwise, we could go on forever. But I already have how I want to start part 2, so I got to make that note right after the show.
Sounds
We can
good.
do that coming up
For
either
sure.
in Florida
Yeah.
or
even in
next
Florida.
time you're up
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I've already got because I love the mindset. So where people are missing out, right? If they're not exposed to you and your line of thought, and we didn't even talk about anything really. I mean, you talked about your experience with the training,
Yeah.
but we didn't even talk like any of that stuff. How good you are at that stuff. So we got a lot that we could still cover. But where can people follow? What's the best way for them to follow you?
Probably Instagram is at Dr. John Dougherty. I'll spell it as DrJohnDougherty. It's going to be the same on TikTok. So that would probably be the easiest place where people can find me and consume more of this this content.
Because you're tapping into such a resource in John, guys. And he's a doctor. Like we didn't even talk. Like there's so much elements. How old are you again now?
So I'm 34.
34.
Yeah.
Think about that at that age, right? I mean, you didn't even come into your prime yet, man. Like I believe the prime is like 40, like 40 to 60.
Oh yeah.
I mean, imagine when you hit that because you have more experience then.
For sure.
But yeah, it's amazing, man, and this was definitely a pleasure. There's a lot to learn from you. You guys can follow me at the Panda Man Official, and Instagram is the place to be right now for us. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Make sure you leave a review and share this with somebody because this is, to be honest with you, might be the only episode I ever go back and re-listen to that I've done myself because there's so many like thoughts I was having as John was talking and things I was connecting dots with in my own head. So it's definitely, I'm going to go back and take notes on this. So I suggest you guys do the same. Thanks for tuning in, guys.